Hello and welcome to another episode of the Barnsley Startup Meetup with me, your host Matt Roberts as usual. With me today is a repeat visitor, and my first repeat visitor on the podcast. I've got Peter Wright from Digital Law. Digital Law are based here in the DMC, if you didn't catch the previous video with Peter, and they focus or specialise in all things kind of digital law. It's in the name. So rather than go into detail, like huge detail about digital law and how you got into business, Peter, I'll just simply ask, how has business been since our last interview? I think it was probably about a year ago almost, maybe a little bit less. Or a little bit more.
Well, the interesting thing, I think, in the 12 months since then is we are now doing an increasing amount of work around AI. Now, we've always done work on AI. Indeed, I was digging out a bit of our promotional material that I found some leaflets from back in the days when we did more hard copy, and it was sort of, pre-COVID and everything, and we'd done a rebrand back then. And one of the things listed on there was AI.
Right.
So we've been talking about AI and machine learning for a long time. I remember working with the Royal Society when I was on the board at the Law Society. We were doing some work around AI, machine learning, and feeding into some of the work that was happening there, which was absolutely fascinating. But I think the difference is that whereas a lot of that was high-end research and theoretical, the thing is now we have the affordable tools that are out there that people are using every day. And we are doing quite a bit of work helping businesses when it comes to doing things like getting guidelines into place so that they've got a plan so that if they then want to procure a piece of tech, they know what questions to ask the suppliers, they know what the risks might be, and then they know what sort of questions to ask of those suppliers in terms of the contracts, in terms of the data. And they've thought more broadly about issues around how their staff are using AI, the free tools, the tools that they provide. So I think it's a sort of a greater awareness. I think businesses are becoming more alive to the risk and wanting to put tools in place to try and categorize that risk, get on top of it and do something about it. And I think this is more broadly where things are going in terms of that sort of risk for organizations. They're sort of not classifying it as, we're complying with data protection, or we are, concerned in terms of cybersecurity breaches. Of course, they're worried about that, but this is kind of the next frontier. And I think for some organizations, it's been a bit of a blind spot. And I've seen some people procure platforms and then go, we shouldn't have done that. And actually, we've exposed ourselves to a problem.
Nice. So that's something obviously that you're going to be talking about at the Startup Meetup tonight, and it's like you say, it's a really hot topic at the moment, and particularly for understanding what the compliance and what the risks for a business are around using AI, and particularly we're talking here really LLMs and things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all of those sorts of things. But I guess then also wider in terms of the image generation ones and the video generation ones, and things like that. And so let's kind of because I came to the festival, the kind of the day long session that you put on at Sheffield earlier in the year, which was really interesting, and I was interested around the kind of medical element that you had as part of the session. And something that was quite interesting for me from that was I think it was a gentleman from AstraZeneca was talking about how they for the medical profession, or at least the medical market, the regulator doesn't really care whether it's an AI agent that's generated a formula or whether it's a person that's generated a formula. Fundamentally, they still just have to tick all of the boxes that make it appropriate for them to sign off a drug for use, right? But for me, the interesting thing was I assumed that then the regulator is using AI to do the initial sorting of those applications, right? And so what is there any risk that you can see around AI marking other AI's homework?
Yes. Yes, there is a risk there. And there's also, I think, a significant risk in terms of the things we're asking AI to do. Are we asking the right systems to do the right tasks. And I mean that from how some systems are built. Some in particular of the freebie systems that are out there, your free version of ChatGPT, the free version of Gemini, or if you go on and open a X account, if you go on and use Grok, you've got tools that are there that are designed to sort of engage, give you an experience where I could almost be speaking to a person here. And indeed, apparently, for those that use these systems a lot, that's becoming an issue where apparently the people are developing a psychosis where, all their time is spent engaging with the AI, and to a point where apparently there was been a few cases in the States of people engaging with these systems, and then I think one person was convinced they'd come up with a cure for cancer or something, and then had to be sort of gently persuaded that no, the fact that the chatbot had told them, oh, this is really great, and you should do this, and you should do that, and great, we've done this. None of it was true. But of course, if you've gone a long way down the rabbit hole, the point is that these things have been sometimes designed to encourage and entertain more than actually do an accurate piece of processing or task management for you. And even then, some are designed to help you with your tasks, help you with your calendar, help you be more productive, as opposed to do some real detailed analysis or processing. So when we're talking there about, well, what might a regulator be using something for? You'd hope that they would have the right tool or tools that are designed to be able to critically look at and appraise, say, a bit of research that's been done, and then work out where there might be questions that need to be asked, or might be able to then go, oh, well, actually, we agree with this, and here's 3 other peer-reviewed papers or studies that also back that up, and from this we can draw that. And so that there can be quite a lot of legwork that previously would have been done by researchers and analysts. You can have certainly an initial sift done by the AI. And this is happening like you said, in medicine in particular, but also in professions, in law, in accounting, in lots of areas where it's almost like that initial sift, that sort of big exercise of research. If you think of that in terms of almost like a funnel where you've got to start, where do you even start? The AI will start for you and look at lots of sources of information and then gradually whittle it down to a point where what then gets, the first time that's then looked at by a human, they're then brought in at a point where they have a little bit of the work's been done. It's almost like you're checking what's been done, seeing if you agree with it, and then critically adding more refinement to that work that's already been added. Big example of this is in recruitment now, where sometimes you have thousands of people apply for a position, and you can get some sifting that's carried out where it will whittle down so you haven't got a human being looking at 2,000 CVs. The human might get involved when they've whittled it down to, say, a pool of 30 that we think these are the most appropriate people for the role. And what's particularly interesting is when I speak to some people who go, oh, yes, well, AI is all well and good, but we don't really use it in our organization. This is when I'm speaking to managers, senior partners, and we don't use it. And you're like, really? You go around and you actually ask your staff, are you using AI? And they might not go, well, okay, you haven't procured any and you haven't deployed a bespoke tool for us, but yeah, we're using, it could be ChatGPT, or they could be using a note taker, an AI note taker, or they could be using something to help them with their spelling or their grammar, that they could be using tools on their phone to help them. And the management won't even know this, and they won't even be alive to some of the compliance risks that again creates from tools that aren't designed for business use being used for professional business use.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is or at least come to as one of the questions is just because there's no policy within the business doesn't mean that it's not being used. And then also, there must be some risks associated with knowing, an employee not being awake to the fact that they might well be putting sensitive information, or more than likely putting sensitive information, into a public tool that has very clearly within its terms and conditions that it's going to use that for its own purposes. I guess, are there any ways that businesses can mitigate that?
Well, I think one of the key things is to make sure that you've trained staff on how these tools should be used. So, for example, if you've got someone saying, "Oh, I'm going to use the AI to draft a report for a client on XYZ," you might get it to draft some specific, it might do some analysis for you, it might do a couple of paragraphs, but you wouldn't turn around and say to it, "Please draft a report for Mr. and Mrs. Smith on blah, 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 blah," that they've asked, can we check, their tax status or their estate planning. Because very often these platforms are designed in the United States and California. California has data protection law, but it's radically different from what we have in the UK and Europe.
Yeah.
And therefore it isn't built to comply with that. And indeed, that personal data could then be used for modeling. It could be used to train the system. Who knows? But if you say, for example, are a professional, like say a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, you're subject to a duty of professional confidentiality. If you are then using a AI tool that is not secure, you are breaching that fundamental. Well, this is one of the first things that they sit down and teach you. The minute you walk in and start your degree or start your professional training, this is one of the first things is, by the way, is this thing called confidentiality, and you have to really be careful because you can get struck off if you fail to observe it. But I am seeing some firms using tools, for example, that appear on video conferences and start taking notes that are not secure. And I've ended up sort of drafting reports for these firms saying, you do realize that the platform that you're using isn't secure, and you then get a mixture of denial and obfuscation from the management of those firms where they try and defend the indefensible. But it's like, well, it's black and white, it's there in the terms. If you looked clearly at what you were signing up to, you wouldn't have just breached your professional standards, and you may wish to, if the regulator takes a look at this, you've got a serious problem.
Yeah. So are there ways that organizations that have to deal with extremely sensitive information, are there ways that they can then find opportunities to secure, or are there secure systems out there? Are there secure methods in which they can implement AI safely within their organization?
There are secure systems out there. There's some great innovation that's being done specifically in the fields of med tech, fintech, insurtech, law tech. You name it. You're getting some really good specific tools designed to respect the data protection laws, designed to respect confidentiality, designed to assist productivity in the ways that you would think these tools would. But of course, you do have to go out and procure them. You have to onboard them. You have to pay for them. And sometimes you get some organizations that I think want the quick hit of the, oh, great, we can have the productivity boost. They don't necessarily want to sign up to, you've now got to pay for that tool on a subscription basis on a monthly or annual basis.
Or per seat as well. But I guess the benefit there, though, is that I would assume, or I would imagine, that a lot of these tools are then, for want of a better word, trained or seeded with information or context that's specific to the business that's procuring it. And as a result, the research, the multi-search capability, the output from those tools is then that much more specific and valuable to the business, as opposed to being a generic hallucination.
Exactly. So you are getting those good bespoke tools that then the more they're used, they will deliver more value to the firm, the more it gets out of it. And they'll get more value the more that staff have the freedom to experiment and innovate using those, to come up with more, to exercise their ingenuity in terms of coming up with the right prompts and finding out exactly the power of what the tools will do. And in particular, bearing in mind that these things are evolving rapidly. So, there is the scope there for sometimes, a new version, a new evolution will come out, and then staff can go, oh, right, great, it does this now. And some will capitalize that and utilize that far more rapidly than others. But that's just it. The tech is there to allow for that innovation. You want to, as a business owner, though, you want to try and encourage that in a safe environment for your business, though, right? Because, like you say, none of us are masters of everything. There's going to be some people that are just
excellent at picking up new things or seeing the opportunity in new innovations and the like, and as a result, it's all good for your business, provided that it's done in an environment that is safe for your compliance element.
And it also comes down to making sure, as I say, that you're using the right tools. I mean, I've heard, and this is one of those sort of things where I speak to people in lots of different sectors, and I was speaking to one chap who is engaged in sort of the bids and tenders on behalf of his organisation. And he started to do the interesting exercise of asking ChatGPT, what is another organisation, what's their bid for such and such a tender? And ChatGPT gives him a figure.
Wow.
Now, is ChatGPT hallucinating out of its childlike desire to please and give you some information, rather than going, no, don't know, haven't got a clue? Or are we talking about an organisation actually, and this is the big risk, I think, is someone actually using freebie tools to actually draft their tenders, these great long, somewhat onerous documents to draft, and they're doing that through freebie GPT, and that information is then being sucked through and is being squirted out elsewhere. Is it learning from the exercise and doing it that way? But that gives you an idea there. If we aren't just talking about the risk from personal data, it could be commercial, confidential, commercially sensitive data that you could be unwittingly putting out there into the ether.
And you can see how that would happen almost innocently, can't you? In the sense that it might not even be the bid team for the opposition, or opposition for the competition, who did that. It might, in fact, it's unlikely to be. It might well be a part of the another part of the organisation where a manager's asked for a summary of whatever it is that they've put in, and so the underling has gone, well, I can't be asked to sift through all of this and come up with a thing, so therefore whack it in and go, you tell me what that is and summarise it. Just before I forget, it's a bit of a segue, but actually it struck a chord when you mentioned there earlier around like supply chains and doing your due diligence on your supply chains. I assume that there's an element of carbon use in ChatGPT tools, or rather LLM tools, and as a result, with the more kind of net zero rules and regulations that are coming in, businesses would have to assess their provider of these tools according to how much carbon they use and how much energy they use, right?
Well, for certain larger organisations that have adopted the quite sort of rigid ESG rules, then yes, that's something they should be looking at. You have just hit the nail on the head of the irony as we sort of rush towards adopting certain tools and tech, thinking that, this will be, the future, and this is going to save us so much in terms of productivity and allow us to expand how services are delivered, that yet they can be quite horrifically bad for the environment. We've got awful. Google's building, server farms the size of Manhattan Island. We've got increasingly large volumes of energy being required to power these systems, to the point that it's even been recommended that, stop saying thank you to Siri and Alexa and ChatGPT, because the processing power they will have to use to then say, oh, you're welcome, is not insignificant.
Yeah.
So, and, as you quite rightly say, we've had, over the last 10 to 15 years, a real push to say we need to think about, net zero targets, we need to think about climate change and sustainability. Well, that's all well and good. But at the same time as we've been, saying, we need to fit solar panels and have more electric cars, and you can have interesting arguments on sustainability of some of those electric cars. That's an argument for another day. But at the same time, think about the increased energy use as we all walk around with even more powerful phones, with even more rare earth minerals trapped inside them, using things like Spotify that, again, use large server farms with large amounts of electricity. Same thing for an awful lot of these tools, and in particular the AI-powered ones, that mean that overall humanity's actual draw on all of those resources is greater now than it was when we started the exercise of being concerned about, oh, look at all the carbon we're using. A horrible irony, really, that, you know, we might be making advantages in some respects in terms of, I think, the UK is now producing less in terms of emissions around burning of carbon than it has since before the Industrial Revolution. Right. But I say we're all turning around using tons more electricity.
It's just displaced as well, right? It's we as a country might well not be doing that, but that's because it's displaced to server farms in other countries, right?
Yes.
And that they're using it.
Yeah.
And I think if anyone in software development or in tech job roles was concerned that their jobs are going to be going away overnight, then actually it's like any other sort of advancement in the sense that whilst the roles that AI agents are replacing are going away, it generates a whole new load of roles, right? I know of a number of organizations, large corporate organizations, where they're replacing, let's say, first line support with as many AI agents as they can lay their hands on. The cost of those AI agents being inefficient is huge for the business. And so therefore, there's a whole new raft of roles that are about agent efficiency, kind of development, and making those agents as lightweight as absolutely possible to reduce the cost on the business.
And I've also seen quite a few organizations, particularly in that sort of area of quite creative finance and embedded finance tools that we've seen. A lot of them jumped on the, we can get rid of all our call centers and big crews of people answering phones or working on chats and customer service. And then they've actually had to recruit back quite large numbers of staff to take on those functions again, because the AI simply hasn't been able to provide the right level of customer service.
Yeah.
And then they've started to lose customers and users as a result.
Yeah.
But the point you make about, you know, AI and tech, sometimes it means that certain roles, there might not be as many of them, or indeed they're removed, but others are created. I always think it's quite interesting to think back to a few different points in sort of evolution of technology. We could go all the way back to, you know, if you went 300 years ago and we went into, and here we are in South Yorkshire, if we went into a field in South Yorkshire 350 years ago, and you'd see some poor soul toiling the fields, and you said, no, so not too long from now, someone's going to invent a seed drill that will do what you're doing an awful lot more quickly. And I fast forward to our age, and we've got machines doing all of this, and vast farms run by just a handful of people using big, expensive, complicated machines. And they'd go, well, that's terrible. What's everyone going to do? And then you'd nod sagely and say, oh, yes, they'll be engaged doing search engine optimization or, you know, working in call centers. And they'd look at you blankly because, of course, they cannot conceive of these things. And I think we will, you know, now there are roles that will be around in 5, 10, 15 years' time we can't think of. We're seeing now with the evolution of AI, a shift fairly similar to what happened in certain sectors just with when the personal computer came along in the early 80s. So if you look at accounting, this revolution there was the spreadsheet. Spreadsheets existed before computers came along, but it was all massive sheets of paper, sort of the size of this desk with loads of cells and, you know, people with abacuses and pencils, and you'd have a spreadsheet that would run a factory. And if you got a supplier who provided something at a different price, you'd have to get out the rubber and rub out the column and then calculate it again and see how that would change all of the outputs. And I say a factory because that sort of accounting was not available to individuals or the average SME or a shop or a supplier elsewhere. Along comes, I think it was the Apple II, and suddenly you've got these spreadsheets, and of course all those people that would have had abacuses and whose job would have been filling in a spreadsheet, you're told, sorry, we don't need you anymore now, just press this button and it's done. And it's done in a fraction of a second rather than taking a week or two.
Yeah.
So instantly you've got people who are going, well, great, that's my livelihood gone. But then the flip side of that was accounting becomes available to all. How many people now, not just high net worth individuals, but I think, the average individual will now have an accountant. If you need to submit a tax return, you're going to an accountant for help with that because the thing's that complex that you need help with it. So it made accounting affordable. It made, the PwCs and Deloittes of this world are now some of the largest corporations in the world because they're efficient on delivering their accounting and then moved into wider consulting and business support. Yeah. None of that happens without spreadsheets coming along and changing how that happens. But, accounting I always think is more linear. How tax and things work and numbers. I don't work with numbers, I'm a lawyer. Yeah. And I always thought I was safe from that, but it turns out no, now we've got a machine that does reasoning and thinking for you. So it turns out that, now it's time for the lawyers and the researchers to have that problem in terms of, machines can do certain things here more efficiently. But for example, in law, we're talking about unmet legal need. All those people at the moment might have a legal problem and cannot afford to go to a lawyer. If lawyers can provide those services more cheaply through AI, then you've potentially got hundreds of millions of people around the world who will then have access to quality legal advice and quality legal tools that they didn't previously have. Yeah. It's just getting there is going to be somewhat painful. And I do not minimize for a second those who are going to have to have a challenge. And we're finding that in the legal profession. Yeah. There's firms that are going out of business. There's people thinking, I've spent thousands of pounds qualifying and then finding that the role that I was planning on doing isn't going to be the sustainable future career I thought. So I do not for a second minimize that. And I think it's going to be an incredibly painful journey. Absolutely. And it's going to happen very, very quickly as well when we look at the innovation that OpenAI and others are sort of headlong charging towards.
Yeah, yeah. But again, like the ones, if you're flexible and you're able to see opportunity where there is where it exists, then I guess there's opportunity, like you say, there's opportunity to expand your market or to open up new markets to your organisation or to your business. Lovely. I could talk about this for ages, Peter, but I do have to ask one question, and it won't be the same question that I normally ask, actually, because I know that I've already asked you. I think it was shawarma, some kind of flatbread that you would go for.
We had about a half hour on digestive health because I can't eat bread. So
absolutely. So I might change it up a little bit, and I will ask you, what's your ultimate drink, Peter?
Well, two answers to that. The drink that gets me through the day is black coffee, which I've got here with me right now. So, I like, being able to go into a cafe. I'm not ordering something with huge amounts of milk and, it's been thickened and have this. And so I'm always the boring person that walks in and orders like the large black Americano that's about 5 calories, because all it is just a huge amount of coffee condensed into water. And then the second answer, though, this ultimate drink is just water. So I try and stay away from energy drinks and different things. If you're asking me, though, that question from it in terms of drink and alcoholic, well, it would obviously be a malt whiskey.
Oh, really?
So ideally, Talisker Scotch is my personal favourite, which a lot of people find because it has a distinctly dark, peaty texture.
Yeah, okay.
Tends to put a lot of people off.
Yeah,
but I tend to. I find that
of the world.
That's helpful because it means that I can then finish the bottle.
Nice. So single malt whiskey.
Yes.
Like, you're not down for blended or.
I prefer the unique flavours from a lot of the single malts because I say Talisker is from a particular area of the Isle of Skye, and you can sort of almost taste the landscape in what you're drinking.
Have you been on a brewery tour? Have you been on distillery?
Been on the distillery tour. Yes, I have done the Talisker distillery tour.
Oh, nice. Yeah. What's it like? Is it did it live up to expectations, or was it basically just go in so you can have a drink at the end?
Well, you always want to make sure, ideally, that you aren't driving to these places. So, I took a friend from the States around a distillery, and he heard about the Angel's Share, and it almost like a cultural insight, because, of course, he hears this and he hears a problem that needs to be solved. So he's like, I imagine you could put together some system to sort of collect the droplets and recycle it and do this. And the tour guide was like aghast at the idea that you would deny the angels their share. It was just like, calm down, don't worry. It's just, this is something that has to happen, and it's priced into the process, you know.
Isn't it like, because they reuse the barrels, don't they? So like, doesn't it? Isn't that where a large amount of the flavour comes from? Like, is those kind of compound years of whiskey soaking into the barrel, and then they flame it and things like that as well.
Indeed, and that's just it. It's all these little local things, and different distilleries will do different things, which lead to the unique flavours and tastes of different ones. So my wife's favourite is Dalmore, which is just a particularly nice one. So it's always, sometimes you'll get the client who says, "Oh, so you know, do you have a particularly favourite one?" So and then sometimes you get a very nice bottle of whiskey at the end of a piece of work, which is nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining me again, Peter. And as always, we've got Startup Meetup event, in-person event on the second Thursday of every month here at the DMC in Barnsley. And Peter's going to be, as I said earlier, Peter's going to be doing the talk for this evening's event on AI and compliance and how to navigate that as a business, particularly a small business. And so if you can make it down, then check out Eventbrite. We're on there. We're on LinkedIn and TikTok as well. So feel free to come down and see what we're all about. Other than that, thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.